What does it look like to meet God in the midst of grief? How do we tell stories of sorrow that are honest, unflinching, and still full of grace? In this episode of Lead with Storytelling, I'm honored to sit down with Sharon Garlough Brown, spiritual director, speaker, and best-selling author of the Sensible Shoes series. Sharon is the co-founder of Abiding Way Ministries, where she creates space for spiritual formation through retreats, resources, and soul deep storytelling. Her latest novel, Remember Me, is a tender and powerful exploration of grief, suffering, and the mysterious nearness of God in our darkest seasons. In this conversation, we talk about writing stories that walk with readers through pain, how fiction can be a form of ministry, and why grace often surprises us in the valley more than on the mountaintop. Whether you're a reader, a writer, or someone carrying quiet sorrow, this one's for you. Let's begin. Hi, Sharon.
Hello, Sachi. So good to be with you.
I'm honored. I'm honored, and I would say, let me start off by saying, I read Remember Me, and I enjoyed it immensely. For me, it felt like prayer, because it had a reflective, introspective tone to it. More, more importantly, on another level, I could relate with the characters and they were humane to me, relatable, especially kids whom I could not, for the life of me, understand how anyone could have so much patience and so much compassion. But again, I guess that's really at the heart of the tension in the book for anyone who hasn't read this, which is touching on very sensitive issues of grief, depression, mental health, and also the state of the church. That's my taking on the book, on the state of the church with regards to how can the church be compassionate to people who deal with, who carry the world on their shoulders.
Yes.
And um, even more, and also especially for maybe academics as well, as sometimes we try to overthink some of these issues of mental health and also surrendering agency or even trying to have agents take agency for our will, and especially when we shouldn't really have to. I think there's a place, or to an extent there's an extent to which, um, as humans, we can take ownership or take responsibility or try to control what is happening to us, what we're experiencing, and lose sight of the availability, the capacity, the predestined, the pool of God's grace to see us through where our own will stops. And there is in saying that, and I put this in my very short review on Goodreads about after reading the book. This touches on also to me the thread of theology, personal theology that are on suffering that I found very reasonable, which is that there is a core idea or a core belief of what it means to suffer, and also what it means for God to still be present while we are in that dark place. And I guess this is just off the top of my head. I still have a book review to write and to maybe make a video on your book. But I'm really excited to touch on these issues, to touch on your thinking around the book, your inspirations, and your work generally. And I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you. And you've honored me already, Sachi, in terms of describing the context of the book and the journey that the characters are making, and by extension, the journey that the readers are invited to make. So thank you.
Awesome. Let's start off with an easy question.
Mm.
You you've set this novel in a universe. What is it in the um, uh, Sensible Shoes universe?
I have two different series of novels. So there's the Sensible Shoes novels, and those are four novels. and then the Shades of Light series, where this is the second book of three. And they overlap, Salchi, because the main character in Remember Me is the retreat leader from the Sensible Shoes series. But in the Sensible Shoes series, we don't get to know her backstory at all. She is serving as spiritual director, retreat coordinator. So every once in a while, she'll share an anecdote or a story from her life, but we never get to see how she has been shaped and formed in Christ, the backstory to her suffering, her losses, her sorrow. All we know is that this is a woman with deep compassion, an extraordinary gift of wisdom from the Spirit. And now in Remember Me, we get to travel with her as she very vulnerably pulls back the veil and invites a beloved niece of her, great niece of hers, to share that story with her.
Awesome. And I'll try very much not to give any spoilers because I do have questions about this. Not questions, maybe comments, and
Yeah.
I'll maybe riff off on the subject of small communities and the impact of the decisions we make around how we share, or when we share, or what we share, or choose not to share in those kind of peculiar settings.
Absolutely.
What led you to write this particular story? I mean, what are you hoping that readers will, encounter through it?
I'll set it in the larger context of the series and I think I'll start with contrasting. In the Sensible Shoes series, the characters they've come into a place of retreat and spiritual growth, bringing their losses, bringing their sorrows, but none of them are facing debilitating or chronic illness or affliction. So there's a trajectory of healing and transformation and growth that God, the Spirit, is very much a part of. But in the Shades of Light series, it addresses the issue of chronic affliction, and particularly issues of mental health, depression, anxiety. And the question then becomes, if the Lord does not remove the cup of suffering from us, though we plead with him to do so, how does he reveal his presence with us as we drink? This man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, who did not withhold himself from any of the sorrow or suffering that we experience in this life, he who is with us and for us. And so it addresses a different kind of story than the Sensible Shoes series. And Katherine is a very important part of that story because as Paul says, that they were able to offer to others the comfort that we ourselves have received. And so she, who has endured loss, endured extraordinary trauma, and pain from all sorts of different angles, she has been shaped not to become hard-hearted or cynical, but rather to become compassionate for those who also suffer. So a co-sufferer in the midst of it.
One of the beautiful things I find, and I find myself going back to Cynthia Beatt's writing as well, because there's just so much. There are these common threads I keep picking up. For instance, there was a reference to Church of Redeemer, and I think Katherine, during her time in a certain place, I'm not going to mention, and she found solace in certain rituals that have maybe informed her choices going forward. And one of those choices, one of the rituals that she spoke of, was the Station of the Cross.
Yes.
And participating in the Station of the Cross. And I'm Catholic, so I like to tell people my favorite season in the year is Lent.
Yes.
Not because I am chronic depressed, no, and not because I'm dark. It's just there is something so life-giving,
yes,
about a season that could be misconstrued or could be construed or misconstrued as really about death.
Mhm.
And when you said something about being a co-sufferer and
Yeah.
Catherine embodying the virtues of what it means for a Christian to be a co-sufferer, I can completely relate. And I think this makes Catherine even more interesting because she's fully human.
Yes.
And can you just, I mean, how do you hold that tension between suffering and hope in your writing? I mean, without offering easy answers or
Yeah.
simplistic answers, as sometimes cliche Christian writing can sometimes do.
Absolutely. And such as you say, my books are not tidy. They dive into again the presence of God with us in all these things. One of the really important spiritual practices that I think the church um, is not practiced in is the prayer of lament, where we trust God enough to say the hard things to God. And the generosity of God is that He gives us words in the Psalms and the prophets. He gives us words to express to Him our disappointment with Him, to Him, right? And He knows that if we do not express our despair, our anger, our sorrow, our confusion, our disappointment to Him, we have an enemy who loves to make use of it and turn it toxic. And so to share the journey of lament with the man of sorrows means that, like Jesus, we're able to say things like, my God, why have you forsaken me? And Jesus, when we watch his life as he's alongside people who are suffering, we see that he never rushes them to hope. I love the story of Lazarus in John 11, where when he arrives, and from Martha and Mary's perspective, he's arrived late. He didn't come in time to express the sort of love they wanted him to express, which was making their brother well, right? So now their brother has died. Jesus has, according to their timetable, arrived late. And what he doesn't do when he arrives, he does not say to them, listen, would you stop crying? I'm here to fix it. So, but he enters into the sorrow, knowing he will raise Lazarus from the dead. He still is entering into that grief and companioning them in that devastation before he speaks the word of life and brings resurrection. And that's what lament helps us to do, that we have the companionship and company of God in our sorrow as we offer everything to him. And it takes courage. We have to trust that God is for us in order to have the courage to be honest with him. But he is with us in that offering. And then by his grace, he helps us move toward hope by remembering who he is, by remembering what he has done. But he doesn't rush us to that hinge. And I know out of my own Protestant tradition, the Lent was not regarded, the Holy Week was not regarded. It was all about Easter. And if we skip over the suffering of Jesus, we miss the opportunity for him to enlarge us with wonder and awe at what he chose to suffer for us. So that's the journey of really the Shades of Light novels, is this opportunity to take time to share the journey with Jesus to the cross. And the characters, as you say, are doing that in different ways.
I just love that. And I'll be remiss to not by not talking about again some of the elements that you bring into your book in terms of structure.
Mm.
You have, and you did a good job of setting the tone, the context for the structure that now begins to, I mean, for the structure on which the book was built. We have the narrative runs chapter by chapter,
Yeah.
but it closes out with a very raw, vulnerable letter from Catherine to Ren,
Yeah.
and I found it very very wise. It wise in two reasons, for two reasons. For the reason that Catherine wrote it, I believe it would be or was or might have been very effective. But also for me as a reader to be able to collect and put some structure to the thoughts that might have run through my mind in the interactions between Catherine and other characters and the dynamics around her own life, but also by the intimacy of the words that you use to build those letters. I mean, what was your idea, or how did you get that idea for that kind of structure? Because it was really powerful. And this is as opposed to other kinds of books that maybe, or devotionals perhaps, that close out with reflection questions and maybe call to actions and things like that.
Yeah, it's a great question. Everything that I write is a response of prayer to what I sense the Lord is doing. So for this particular one, this was the way that it really started with the thought of when someone like Ren is suffering from debilitating depression, and she's just endured a trauma that has devastated her. She's in the throes of grief. Words are too hard. Presence she might be able to remember, but words she can't hold. And in the Shades of Light book, which precedes Remember Me, Ren and Katherine have been talking about doing a joint project together, where Katherine, as part of Ren's kind of road to recovery out of a depressive episode, Katherine invites her to meditate on the cross, to meditate on Jesus' road to the cross, and to do that not only reading scripture, but to paint art. And Ren has asked Katherine if she might share her story too. So this is kind of the answer to that Ren now doesn't have the capacity to receive Katherine's story in conversation. So Katherine decides to write it down as a letter for her. And Katherine, in following on their ideas and conversations from the previous book, she's seeking to wrap her own narrative of her life around the narrative of Jesus' journey to the cross. And that's how she's holding it together, by meditating on the word and seeing her own resonance with the life of Jesus as he journeys from Gethsemane to Golgotha.
Awesome. Do you keep a prayer journal?
I do. I have journaled since I was a teenager, and I don't even know how many books I have in this house. But it's one, I often don't know, Sachi, what I'm noticing, what I'm naming, what I'm being invited into, until I take the time to write it. And in that pen to paper, the Lord is revealing and the Lord is showing. And so then not only do I have that journey of him in the pages, but I also then have a record of my life with God. And I do frequently review that prayerfully, just to see, Lord, how have you worked with me in the past? It's a way of remembering. And then it also helps me to notice resonance with how he's currently working with me. And so it's been a really important part of my journey, and it certainly is for Katherine as well.
And I found it very instructive in your book that that having a prayer journal does help with building of our characters as Christians or as soldiers. And I find it not so often preached. Really, it's been more of vocalizing prayers, and rarely or even less often talking about the benefits, the blessings that come from actually articulating those words. Right. And also pouring out everything your heart out onto those pages. And I find as every time I come across a book that speaks to it, it again reaffirms that power that we have, or that power that we could miss out on if we don't write these feelings out, write these feelings, and also go into those meditative states while those words are pouring on the pages.
Yeah, it's a conversation that we are marking on paper as we are listening and responding to what God is revealing.
As a spiritual director, how has walking alongside others in their As a spiritual director, how has walking alongside others in their seasons of sorrow shaped the way you write about grief?
It's interesting. Katherine is a spiritual director, and in the first series, she's holding a lot of space for others to process their life with God. And one of the challenges that she's facing is how much of her own life is then how much does she confide about the details of her own life? Because when we're in that spiritual direction space, it's not about me. I'm setting myself aside to listen prayerfully to the one who is in front of me and to the Spirit, deeply with the Spirit. And I'm offering to the person that I'm with, I'm offering what I'm noticing about their life with God, what God's invitations are. But I very rarely bring my own life into that conversation. And that's one of the invitations that Katherine is really wrestling with, particularly as she, like me, is also a retreat leader. So how much of our own life do we bring into that kind of space that might be illustrative for someone else, where I can hold up my hand and say, let me tell you a story about my own life with God. And so I inhabit both of those worlds, Sochi, and they're linked, but in terms of what I'm offering, a retreat space becomes a place where I do feel more free to share story. And that's one of the conflicts, not to give a plot spoiler, but when Ren asks Katherine, do you ever share details of your own story at the retreats that you lead? And Katherine's really challenged by that because she hasn't, right? She's kind of taken that spiritual direction posture into the retreat spaces as well, and has not disclosed how the Lord has shaped her through her suffering and losses. And Ren encourages her to think about that. Katherine says a yes to that, and it causes some conflict and some concern and some family dynamics. So I think we always have to be discerning about, and that's not to say that what Katherine did in terms of sharing her own story was right or wrong. She felt in that moment it was the right thing to do, but it did have consequences in terms of how much she revealed to a group of people.
What kind of encouragement would you offer to Christian writers who feel called to write about difficult themes like suffering and grief and mental health? Especially if you worry about, whether it's too heavy.
The reality, Sochi, is it is going to be heavy, and for some people it will be too heavy to receive. So my Shades of Light series, there are people, I've heard from readers who have said these books are too hard. Sometimes I hear from a reader who says, listen, I am your character, Ren. This is my story, and it's too close to me. I don't have capacity to be alongside someone whose suffering is mirroring my own. However, I'm asking everyone who knows me and my story to read this book so they understand what it feels like from the inside. And that was my hope and my prayer as I began writing this particular series. Number one, to name those who suffer with mental illness with compassion so that they feel seen and heard. And so often they suffer under the weight of accusation, where Christians will say, if you just prayed harder, if you just read more scripture, if you were just part of a Bible study or a prayer group, you should be well. And we would never say that to someone suffering from leukemia. So depression and anxiety, they're already isolating enough, and then we add this layer of shame onto it. So I wanted to break that and let people know who are suffering like my Ren is, that God sees them, not with judgment, but with love and kindness. And then I also wanted to name the journey of the co-sufferer in this. A parent, a spouse, a neighbor, a teacher, someone who's alongside an afflicted one who is pleading for the Lord to heal and restore and make well, and feels helpless and powerless to make well. And there's a particular anguish and agony. I think of the story in Mark's Gospel in chapter 10, where the heartbroken father has brought his son to the disciples, for the disciples to heal him. Jesus is up on the mountain with 3, transfiguration, but down in the valley, this drama is happening, and the 9 can do nothing to help. And when Jesus returns, the conversation he has with his heartbroken father is, the father says to him, help us, right? He uses a plural. If you can do anything, help us. And instead of immediately rushing to a healing, Jesus looks at the father and says, how long has this been happening? Right? He doesn't need the details, but he knows the father needs a place to pour out the story of the disappointment, the heartache, the anguish of watching this beloved child suffer and feeling powerless for it. And so that's part of what my novels do as well, is make space for the co-sufferers. And then finally, as you mentioned earlier, a call to the Church of Jesus Christ, a call to compassion, a call to listening, a call to this incarnational presence where we enter into the suffering that someone is in without trying to fix it or talk themselves out of it, but just to share that sacred space, because that's what Jesus is doing.
So I know that fiction often creates space for readers to process, their emotions, and especially around these very heavy subjects. Have you seen Remember Me open doors for healing conversations around grief and God's presence?
I have, and I've been really honored not just to hear from readers, but also from grief counselors, from spiritual directors, from therapists who are finding within these pages something that they can pass along to the people that they're alongside, and that's a deep honor to know that the Lord is using it in that way.
I'm very happy to hear that, because there is so much resource that is needed. I think in many ways and historically we are still in the nascent phases or nascent stages of understanding some of these issues or afflictions.
Yes.
I think we've come out of the dark age of demonizing people who have those issues, and we're not so far from that, the tip or the end of that stage, because even now we still have remnants of theologies or beliefs that if you say you have suicidal tendencies or fantasies, you are maybe possessed, and the stigma that causes, and you allude to some of these tendencies
Yes.
by the church in the book, where people would maybe look at someone and just by sight of them or by the surface knowledge that you have of their history, their background, you already make a judgment, and you begin to put them in a box without knowing that you are actually tipping them over the edge, if unwittingly.
Yes.
But do you see how this could be reversed? Or rethought, the approach being rethought by the church.
Oh, that is my prayer. And that was one of the things the Lord and I really talked about as I was feeling very much led to write at that moment. I didn't realize it was going to be a series, but beginning with Shades of Light, is that if there was something that he could do through my books to move the conversation forward, and to really, this is what the Spirit does so beautifully, is he holds up mirrors so that we can see ourselves, and he shines light so that we can see him more clearly. So if he can use my books to hold up a mirror where I remember leading a book discussion group on Shades of Light, and some of the most encouraging things I heard toward the end of the weeks together was people saying, I never had any patience. I have friends, I have family members. I never had any patience for what they're going through. And I'm beginning to see that maybe there's a different way for me to be alongside. Thank you, Lord. And story, as you know, Sachi, story is stealthy, right? We don't go into story expecting to be taught something. So we enter that space with our defenses down, and that gives opportunity for the Holy Spirit to come in slant and stealthily and open us to a journey that we didn't realize we were saying yes to when we opened the book.
When you use that word slant, it triggers a memory from an Emily Dickinson poem. Tell the truth, but tell it slant.
Yes.
That's why you say slant, it just
yes.
How so on the nose.
Yeah.
And I like to think. So I did hear a bird tweeted in my ears that you have a friend who is joining you. I had the privilege of speaking with Cynthia and about her book Surface of Water, and
yes,
it came to my knowledge that she would be joining you on a special project.
Yes.
And I'm going to get to the second question, which is even more interesting for me. But yeah, you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So Cynthia and her husband Dave have been dear friends of ours for many years. Really, prayer partners where we were routinely sharing meals around a table and talking about life and ministry and art and creativity and the movies we were watching. And it was just a beautiful journey. And she and Dave were very, very instrumental. In fact, I would say that the Lord, without their help, I don't know how I would have made it through our international move, because my husband had already left for Scotland and had already started work, and I was trying to get a house ready to sell. And Cynthia and Dave were at the house on their hands and knees, scrubbing cabinets and washing windows and doing some repair, because Dave's that kind of guy where he knows how to fix a screen door. And then fast forward 3 years, and the four of us were having a Zoom call back in February. And we mentioned to them that we were really praying about whether the Lord was calling us to try to put together a proposal for the UK government to grant us a visa for an artist in residence to come and serve at our church. And as we were talking about this, all of our eyes kept getting wider and wider. And because I knew that Dave and Cynthia had been praying about what God might have in mind for them as a next step. And where was the Spirit going? And we looked at each other and said, wait, what if the Lord was calling the two of you over to serve with us in Dundee, Scotland, and the two of you would be living in the church apartment, and also helping to take care of the building. And so fast forward, and they actually have now bought their tickets to fly over on August 11. The visas have been approved. And so the Lord has opened a door for the four of us to be here together in Dundee. That only God can write stories like this, right? If we put things like this in fiction, people might say, oh, that's unbelievable. But God does these. He's master storyteller. And so we're so grateful that we'll have some new ministry partners alongside of us in what the Spirit's doing here in Scotland.
Awesome. I'm really happy to hear it. What I find heartwarming is how also, this is a story of friendship.
Yes.
I have a question, and this is not a writerly question. So if anyone is listening to this and was expecting only writerly, bookish questions, feel free to stop listening. But this is this is my private question, and so I've gotten to an age where friendship has a different meaning or has a different, like an acquired taste, and there are not so many. I have a very, very small circle. So I always try to drink at the fountain of knowledge of people who I see who have, kind of nursed or nurtured friendships to older years. How do you do it? How do you keep the flame burning? How do you keep in touch, and especially long distance? Yeah.
This was one of the greatest gifts out of the pandemic, was being able to shift conversations online. And yes, being face to face will always be a particular gift. But I have found that the Zoom meetings that we began to practice during the pandemic have served me so well that I'm able to continue to connect with friends around the world that honestly, Sachi, I had lost touch with before the pandemic. And then the pandemic, when we were all shut down and couldn't go anywhere, and there were all these opportunities, since my friends, we were all home from work, and suddenly I was connecting with people that I hadn't seen or talked to in 20 years, and relationships, the seeds of relationships, they were watered, and we discovered how deep the roots already were, even if we were kind of dormant. And so now I have a regular group of friends, childhood friends, that I'm Zooming with regularly. And then also the beautiful community that we formed with friends in West Michigan, having lived there for 20 years. So ministry partners, and I am so blessed to have the kind of friends that we see, that kind of friendship in Mary and Elizabeth, where Mary, who has just received word that she will become the literal dwelling place of the Most High God, and she knows that the person who can understand that is someone who has also experienced the grace of God in an extraordinary way. And so she makes her journey to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth is the sort of person that is able to recognize the Spirit's work in someone else and celebrate it. And that's the deepest kind of friendship, where we can be in relationship with one another and say, I see the Spirit of God at work in you. You might not see it yet, but I can testify the Spirit of God is at work in your life, and we can celebrate together. And I will be alongside of you for whatever season we're privileged to walk together in this. And that's a great gift. And for those who are maybe feeling a heartache of, I don't even know what having a friend like that would be like, is that then is the prayer. Lord, you know the longing of my heart, or the fear, or perhaps a sense of maybe there was a loss or a betrayal attached to an important friendship in the past that's made it hard to trust that there might be something waiting for you. And we bring all of that into conversation with God and ask for just one trustworthy companion to share the journey with.
So thanks a lot for that. This is one segment of the podcast I will definitely be passing on to a few friends. And we did, and you did touch on the subject of betrayal in the book, which is very interesting. I'm not going to talk more than that. Say more than that.
Yes.
But I want to just slide in a comment about that it was, you handled it graciously, or rather, Katherine handled it graciously. If I made reference to you as the writer, it would be in the way that you fleshed out that, wrote out that story. But while I would say Katherine handled that betrayal graciously, and I feel like it wasn't said or told in the story as a wound healed, but more like a heal that was handed over or surrendered. And I want to say thank you for sharing that bit of the story. I know a lot of us carry betrayals, stories of betrayal, and we hang on to it.
Yes, yes. And I love the way that you phrase that, Sachi, is that it was a surrendered. The wound remains. And in the grace and generosity of God is that our wounds become like his, our wounds become glorious, and they reveal the work of Jesus if we will offer them to him. And if I each of my characters get different parts of me and different conversations that I've had with God. So even in that context of betrayal, I can speak to something out of my own life that I gave Katherine without giving plot spoilers away. Um, I, as many of us do, we can have relationships that require a continual practice of grace and forgiveness. That just some people can be a challenge to our formation in Christ. So I had experienced a number of years ago, some very, very deep frustration with someone who was giving me frequent opportunities to practice forgiveness. And I was rehearsing the injury with a lot of resentment. And I heard the Lord say to me, she already has an accuser. Do not join him in his work. And I gave that to Katherine. Not the details of the story. Her details are different. But that particular surgical word where the Lord held up a mirror to me and said, this is a path to freedom. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was really touching. And now we come to the surprise.
Okay.
So I always have a rapid fire question session with my guests.
Yes.
It's a good thing that nobody told you about this before now.
Nope, this is a surprise.
Good. So you can be genuinely surprised. Thank you. You ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome.
I'm bracing myself, but I'm ready.
Oh, don't worry. You're not going to lose. You're not going to lose anything. Might get a badge though, but that's good. What's your go-to comfort food?
Oh, especially here in Scotland, it's American, so a really good burger or a really good pizza. But my regular, no matter what continent I'm on, is a cup of tea. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do they make really good burger in Scotland?
It depends.
Don't be political.
No political at all. And honestly, we've had some conversations. We wonder if perhaps it's left over from the austerity of war and post-war, that I think sometimes the beef has some fillers in it, just as an economic decision. And so, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Then maybe handed down and nobody's asked why.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be?
Oh, the one I really want to have a conversation with is Mary, Mother of Jesus. It's fascinating to me. We know Luke obviously had access to her inner life because he shared details of her thoughts and feelings that otherwise he wouldn't know. But I want to know, I want to hear about her resurrection encounter with her son. And I suspect it was too intimate to be shared. We don't have a record of it, obviously, in the Gospels, but there are conversations I would love to have with her about the swords that pierced her heart and that reunion moment. That would be the one.
Beach or mountains?
Ooh, depending on my mood, either. And where we were in West Michigan, we had kind of beach with woods. And here we're in between beach and mountains. So I love both for different reasons.
Okay. Favorite book that impacted your life?
I've got to go with probably one of the very first Christian books I read after I came to Jesus was Hind's Feet on High Places, which is an allegory of a character named Much Afraid, who is invited to take a journey to the high places with a shepherd. And he promises her that when she gets there, she will understand what it means to be loved and to love. and not so much a plot spoiler, but she says yes to the journey and she's so excited about going with him. And then he introduces her to the two companions that will be keeping her company as she goes. And one is named Sorrow and one is named Suffering. And she's not so sure she wants to take their hands. But I can look back now. I was 20 probably when I read it. And I look back now and I think, oh, wow, I didn't realize how much of that journey made it into my own life with God and then eventually worked out into the books that I wrote.
Well, I'll definitely link to that book so anyone who is listening want to check it out.
Mm-hmm. It's an old, I'm guessing 1940s or 50s probably.
So hopefully it's being reprinted.
It is, yes. It's a kind of a classic.
Awesome. What's a skill you've always wanted to learn but haven't had a chance to yet?
I will say there's a skill that I was going to give a different kind of answer. A skill that I've wanted to learn but haven't had a chance to yet. I think I live such a contented life that I'm not aware of anything. There are plenty of skills I don't have and I have no desire to learn them, like cooking. For many years, I had on our fridge a piece of paper a college friend, university friend had given me that just said, Sharon, if you can boil water, you can make the following food. I haven't moved on too far from that in 35 years. For instance, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so some survival tips there. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sharon, before we go, I'm going to take a snapshot of this conversation. It's a friend I want to share it with, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Okay. Smiling. And with that, we come to the end of this conversation. Thank you so much, Sharon. I appreciate your time. I'm grateful for the gift of your books and stories that you've shared. And I wish you and Cynthia all the best on your new projects together.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And God bless you and your listeners. May each one of us be drawn more deeply into the love of God in all the height, length, depth, and breadth of it.